Speaker is Daalat, who is a member of the Rochdale Borough, UK, and whose contribution in enhancing the Kashmiri identity in terms of his writings on language, culture, and other aspects which normally we people lack, and he has been great asset to our region and for us, Mr. Daalat.
Mr. Chairman, distinguished guests, it is a very, very hard act to follow Dr. Gilani and then the Balochistan Chairman Amir Khan in terms of knowledge and their contribution. Obviously, Mr. Gilani is a law expert, and Amir Khan has a long history in political struggle. I think sometimes it is very important to come down from skies and listen to lay people like myself. And then sometimes we do get bundled into academia and jurisprudence. But as a state subject holder, I think Kashmiris, all of us. And then for that reason, I'm not going to go into state's history in great detail because there are learned people here and enough has been said. I would just say that the state got divided in 1947, and most of us, and most of you, know the reason why. Obviously, people who were attacking the heart of it did attack, and they've been doing that since 1947. It's spoke of a simple invasion rather than any rights or Islam or anything else. And also, my paper is with no means academic. I will just attempt to reiterate some of the facts and then try to provoke a debate. You might find some information, but probably I'm trying to, as a layperson, I'm trying to inform myself what actually happened to us and what is happening to us. The paper mainly highlights Pakistani continuous stealth and at times very blatant encroachment of Kashmirians, resulting in geographic and engineered demographic changes in AJK through Afghan refugees and Balochistan through defacing state subject, encouraging people from surrounding areas to buy land and material, and then injecting and engineering sectarian violence. Now, much water has flown under the bridge in the last 63 years. And I must admit there has been study by both administrations of the former princely state in the way of state's political identity and entity and dynamics of governance. For example, Gilani were talking about some resolution in JNK Assembly. And then if you go back in the 1950s, there used to be a prime minister and president, internal autonomy, and there is no doubt that India encroached that rights of people on JNK. And people lost their internal autonomy. It must be noted that Pakistan's encroachment methods have been somewhat cruder, undemocratic, And according to some impartial commentators, colonial are worse than the role East India Company had in India. And that has come across in the early papers, and I think it will come across in the later papers. What little power people could have, even that, how that is being really, really controlled by Islamabad. Though from a layman's perspective, it would be interesting to carry out a comparative study of the areas under Indian and Pakistani administrations. But some people may argue that what comparison can there be between a thriving democracy and a crude dictatorship? I leave that for you to judge. That is it possible to compare? However, I will try to provoke a serious debate here about the nature of the relationship between Pakistan and areas of the state under our occupation. And I would leave the Indian state or Indian side for experts like Dr. Punjabi over there. It's up to them how they see it. Now in 47, simply Pakistan attacks the princely state, and that creates division. And from then on, the Commissioner of Rawalpindi appoints a president, which was, I think, Sardar Ibrahim Khan. And that was that. Just Commissioner of Rawalpindi appointed a president. Now, in the Gilgit and Baltistan area, essentially were run by a British political agent. And then Wazir Wazarat, who was Maharaja's representative, played a second fiddle. And in crude terms, that political agent was replaced by Pakistan. And then later on 28th of April 1948, the most infamous, notorious and amazing Karachi Agreement was signed by President Ibrahim and then Muslim Conference Supreme Head Chaudhry Ghulam Abbas from, I think it was from Jammu City. The draconian agreement had no representation of Kashmiris from Gilgit-Baltistan or even AJK. Hence, Pakistan created a wedge and invisible boundary between areas under her occupation. Now, AJK, I'd come to POK or AJK, whatever you may like to call it. Presidents were appointed, straight after 47, presidents were appointed at will. For example, there were tribal chiefs, Joy Noor and Ghulam Abbas, Sardar Kyum. One might be favored with Commissioner of Rawalpindi, the other might be favored with Chief Minister of Northwest, it used to be called, and another could be favored with some Nawab Mamdod or something. And there were orders coming in, 3s and 4s. I'm the president, I'm the president, I'm the president. And that is the situation that really, really engulfed Kashmiri people, and that was the respect they had. And then somebody in Pakistan said, well, we can't go on like this. And what they said, they created 21-member committee, a representative committee. And they were all from Muslim Conference and mostly from Jammu. Most of them were from Jammu. And then the turnover of presidents depended on many factors. Like I said, including liking, disliking Pakistani officials. They were just saying that who would sign this up for us. And one of those casualties was K.H. Khurshid. They brought him in, will do something about Kashmir, and because the man had education and conscience, and man knew the whole state. And when he tried to influence them through his intellect, they put him in jail. You know, like, oh, we don't want it. And then they never consulted the 21-member committee then. You know, it's gone. Now this, in reality, created a culture of neo-colonialism. All politicians, instead of paying attention to people's aspirations, like Shadi has mentioned earlier, became too busy trying to police the paymasters, employers. And 63 years on, that remains the case. It is not the people. It is the paymasters in Islamabad that you have to please. Now, I don't know, I'm like I said, it's from a layman's perspective. I think the AJK government was wrong. Like a telephone contract, pay as you go. There were no real set rules. And there couldn't have been any set rules because Pakistan had never had any constitution up to what, 70s? And I, as a layman, I suspect that there was very ad hoc relationship between Pakistan and Gilgit-Baltistan and Azad Kashmir until Shimla agreement. And I think Pakistan got green light during that Shimla agreement to legalize all the stringent measures and encroach legally into the state. And then, I don't know, I've no proof but that I'm a very suspicious person in that sense. I think they got to agree that. Now it then formalized and constitutionalized all about land officers arrangements. And now the land officers, I was talking to somebody, land officers used to be, Maharaja used to bring in land officers. But what Pakistan said was this was in-kind support to AJK government. Pakistani was being kind. They were looking after our affairs. They were looking after our resources. They were looking after our monies. And they were looking after our accounts. So that in-kind help is continuous and is getting stronger and stronger. And obviously, Azad Kashmiri people are not educated. And instead of Azad Kashmiri people going to polling station, Pakistanis kindly put votes in for them. And this is how we create an assembly in Muzaffarabad. And also because there are not enough numbers and diversity, you know, like Azad Kashmiris are really, you know, like Gujars and Rajas and what have you. So they bring another 12 people from Pakistan to introduce and arbitrate between these tribes in Muzaffarabad. And then to bring them to shame, I think they're bringing some women as well. You know, like in the presence of ladies, maybe these tribal chiefs won't abuse each other. So it's a really in-kind help that Pakistan has introduced in Islamabad Assembly and these elections and what have you. And then we should be, instead of arguing here, we should be thankful to them for being kind to us. So you really not. Now, if you go further, as if the army, ISI, MI, these finance secretaries, Inspector General Police, and all the rest of it was not enough. They had to administer your foreign aid. And for that, they created this Kashmir Affairs Ministry. And I first-handly witnessed, and I did a report on when I went there as a layman, an earthquake, all the procurement, all the administration, so on and so forth. Employment came from federal ministry, while Kashmiri young men and women, they may be PhD and what have you, but they were reduced to begging, and all the ministers and civil service and army generals' children were given jobs, and that remains the case. Now, they are so kind as to all the resources and minerals. I don't know about GB, but I know about Mangla Dam, and I know about post-earthquake development. And I'm taking our time by, I don't, like Gilani Sahab, I don't come here every year or 3 times in a year. I only come here 10 times when Mr. Punjabi turns up, and so happens. Anyway, they've got the Bangla Dam contract. I looked at it. It was Chief Secretary who was Pakistani, and he's a water director who is Pakistani, and they are signing on behalf of Kashmiris. In ERA and SERA, one is run by the post-earthquake development. One is headed by Chief Secretary, who is Pakistani, and one is run by a general in the army, who is Pakistani. And they are all kindly doing procuring and making these contracts on behalf of the Kashmiri government. So I would say probably the Hilly Council of Ladakh has more autonomy and power than Azad Kashmir government. But that is because Kashmiris by nature are very lazy. So Pakistan is very kind to run everything for them. And they would like to run meetings in Geneva as well. If it wasn't for people like Gilani and Shaukat Kashmiri and the rest of it, but you just ignore the unthankful to your masters. You will be punished, bad boys. Now, further on, Gilgit-Baltistan was treated different because Azad Kashmir were treated as a political front to whip India, to really inject two-nation theory, and they needed a little heaven. Very few people go to heaven. So Azad Kashmir was two-nation theory heaven, which got saturated by Lashkar-e-Taiba and all the rest of them, the Holy Land. Like if in Kashmiri's area, in his wedding, if you went up, you beat the drum, right, Maulvi Yusuf will come and give you 20 koras, 30 koras, that was the order of the day. So because in heaven people get disturbed. So this Azad Kashmir policy was a heaven for Pakistan. And then Gilgit-Baltistan was more economic driven, because they were rich in minerals and what have you. And for that, Pakistan did a treaty with China in, correct me, 1969? 1969 first trade agreement, I think. I don't know, whatever, in 60s, yeah. And then they thought, well, mountains, we ought to have a road. So they followed it up with 1978 Karakoram Highway, a joint venture. And then they thought, well, these people's got a road and we've got a treaty. If Gilgiti and Balti started using this road, and they might become rich, and they might challenge Pakistan. They might get aware that Pakistan is making billions through Karakoram Highway. So what they did was they said, okay, what we do is we defer the state subject. And there are only about 2 to 3 million. Now, there are loads of people in Pakistan compared to 3 million. So they embarked on engineered demographic changes. I think which is successful now was, they were talking about votes, right? Even if it was fair election, there are more bloody Pakistanis there than local people. So there would be MQM members and Noon members because the states are there. So once they've achieved that level of demographic changes, they open the trade up to individuals. And then Pindi, Bara market, Peshawar, all this is saturated with those individual people, Pakistani people trading from China. Very, very few indigenous people. Now, while all this was going on, very little was known about Gilgit and Baltistan because there were very few diasporic communities outside. They were very content until this ambitious woman from EU, Baroness Emma Nicholson, and she highlighted, and we became aware, and our antennas, laymen started thinking, Baltistan, maybe it is part of our state, and what is happening to them? And then people like Mead and Sanhi came along and tried to twist our head. But sometimes we believe that. So this is how it sort of came out. Now, after Karachi Accord, obviously Gilgit-Baltistan has been ruled by an agent without any local representation, judicial system, it's a local agent, says Kashmiri is bad, is Indian agent, hang him. There was no appellate authority. Very, very similar to Dark Ages in Europe. When the Pope says, this bloke should be stoned or something, stoned, there's only God above Pope, and you can't write to God, you can't send him a text or telegram. And they acted in the similar manner. Even recently, after election, there have been so many protests, and in Parwana, and people have been jailed and killed, and their crime is only because Pakistanis and Chinese are embarked on ecological sort of unsafe mining, and there are lakes coming up and floods and what have you. And all people want is, give us some money to live. Our children are hungry, and the women and children were beaten up in the recent protests. And Parwana, how dare you, we are very kind to you, we made you Krakram Highway, we brought Chinese in. You don't know what is in this mountain, we are digging it out for you, and then how dare you protest against us? Therefore you should be punished. And they've killed people in Ontario. Now, I won't take a lot of your time, Shazia, and I think he's getting bored now. But in summary, as a layman, what I'm saying is, Pakistan has used AJK as a political tool against India internationally. And in order to do that, what they've done is, and somebody said earlier on, there is a chairman of Kashmir committee in Pakistani Parliament. Now, they don't want Kashmiris like us to talk about them sitting here, and Kashmiri diaspora in Britain is 1 million. And their identity has been absolutely encroached and erased. That's a gross human rights act. And people like Umar Farooq and what have you, it does not help when they come here and they don't include us and they exclude us from state identity, because we can't speak Kashmiri. So it has to be beyond Banal and above Kapwara and below Qazi Kund and that little place. That is the only Kashmir. I come from Meerpur. I'm not a Kashmiri. I'm uncivilized. Kashmiris are local state Brahmins. We become untouchable. So he confuses me as a layman. Why? Because you get more. When I say I'm a Kashmiri, I get more opposition from people from Valley than people from Delhi and Islamabad. They might think you're a bad Kashmiri, but they still call me Kashmiri, but the Kashmiri don't call me Kashmiri. Even the others become Punjabi. I don't know why. It took him 40 years. And the other thing is, in the case of GB, like I said, the design seems to be more economic. Yeah? But my question as a layman is, and my grievance, okay, Pakistan is occupying Kashmir. My grievance is with India. Absolute grievance is that I wasn't born there, but my father's ruler, Maharaja, went and acceded to India. My question is, did he accede to India other side of line of control, or did he accede with the full state, GB, Azad Kashmir, and all this law? If it's full state, is that, and then Shazia can put me like, is that accession complete or legitimate? Because you can't have accession for half of the state, right? And now my second real question to India is, following Maharaja's accession, there was a ratification vote in the J&K Assembly for ratifying the accession treaty. Now, in that treaty, were AJK people involved? Were Gilgit and Baltistan people involved? So if Gilgit and Baltistan people are people's representative and AJK people were not part of the ratification treaty, now what is the difference between that treaty and Karachi Accord? Our grievance is Karachi Accord, people were not involved. But in that ratification, people are not involved. And my other real gripe with India is that GNB, state subjection deferred. Yeah. I'm finishing up. GNB state subject deferred. Demographic changes have taken place. The whole